Welcome everybody to today's webinar about HE marketing and leading with impact. Many of you will know me, but I'm Penny Eccles. I'm a CEO and founder of Penny Eccles Limited, and myself and my team specialise in helping universities to grow, specifically grow their student numbers through helping them to achieve a culture of enrolment. So we have two signature products that really help universities to achieve that. And I'd love to invite you, or welcome Ginny Baillie. Hello, Ginny.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. So I'm probably Ginny's number one fan. I probably haven't told her that before, but Ginny is founder of Drum, which specialises in helping people to meet better together. She's really interested in how people gather because, it's really important to get the best work out of people if we gather properly, and I'm sure you'll tell us a bit more about that later. She's a master certified coach and really focuses on helping people make a difference back in their everyday lives. Wide experience of the HE sector as well, and helps university leaders with their intense pressure, managing relationships throughout universities, running better meetings, of course, and getting their teams to really step up. And importantly, Ginny was actually my coach. I've had some triumphs and some low points in my career, and I'm pleased to say that Ginny was with me through many of those. So why are we running this session? Well, I did a call out recently where I asked my LinkedIn following, what would you be really interested in hearing more about? And a lot of you did say HE marketing leadership, because of course being a leader of a marcoms function in a university is really high pressure and can feel a little bit lonely. That's certainly what I found. So Ginny, when I approached you, I was really excited about my new role. I'd just been promoted to marketing director at the University of Gloucestershire. So excited, but I was leading the team through quite a bit of change. So although I was ready to take on the role, I think I was feeling a bit vulnerable and I didn't know who to ask for advice. Do you encounter this a lot with the people that you work with?
Thanks, Penny. The thing is when you get into a leadership position, when you get the role and you get the kudos and you get all the congratulations, you don't get a little manual, you don't get a rule book. And in fact, the rules almost sort of melt away. Well, the spoken ones do. And there's a couple of things to think about here. One is people generally aren't used to opening up in the way you kind of need to get the help you really need. It can feel weird to be so honest and vulnerable. And even if you are surrounded by people that you know and trust, actually getting the really specific help you need to help you think freshly can be really difficult. When I was a stockbroker and I wanted to get out of stockbroking 25 years ago, I had lots of friends, but they were all like, yeah, you're making loads of money. Why are you worried? And I didn't need that. I needed somebody to ask me questions about what I wanted. And in fact, hiring a coach gave me that. So we are often surrounded by good, kind, helpful people, or want to be helpful people, but actually really opening up on what's important and getting the support that we need can be really difficult. So yes, it is something that we see a lot in the coaching community.
Okay, so I wasn't alone.
Absolutely not.
I think the problem is, isn't it, that we rise through the ranks and we prove our successes and we're seen as the go-to person. And then, we find ourselves in maybe the job of our dreams. But sometimes I think we perhaps doubt our own instincts to lead. Have you got any tips to help people build their confidence in their own instincts?
Well, it really makes me laugh when you say job of the dreams, because I think about when I get the contract of my dreams, I sort of like, oh my God, I'm a bit overexcited. And then I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, the confidence in your own instincts. There's a couple of things here, I think, is that be brave to share the courage of your conviction. You might be wrong, but if you don't share them, you won't know. So not all of our instincts are right, but they often can make the conversations more interesting. So having people you can go, do you know what I'm thinking about, and I've got this instinct, or saying to people, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's give it a go, is hold the type of meetings where people feel confident to share ideas and to be rigorous with them, and not to be crestfallen if those ideas don't move forward. I mean, I favour, as long as you don't say it all the time, I favour using humour or caveating. If it's your first time in putting forward ideas, saying to people, can we just see how this sounds? I just want to lay this out, and you can kind of make it easier for yourself to do that. You don't want to be prefacing everything you say with that. And the second thing is you've got to, taking time to think about your ideas, read books, listen to podcasts, talk to people, that type of thing. But you're going to have a leap of faith. As I said earlier, there's no manual with leadership. So there's going to be a leap of faith, particularly if you're different to the leader who came before. I quite often coach people who've got modern ideas, who've got good instincts, but the leader they've taken over from might have been really dictatorial, might have been very traditional and very hierarchical. So they're starting to lead a group of people who are used to being told what to do. And now they've got a leader that wants to share ideas and have discussions. And it can be a tricky transition for the team as well.
Yeah, it's also hard if you join a place and everybody loved the ex-leader as well, isn't it? That's quite hard.
Well, particularly if the ex-leader was a bit rubbish, but everyone really liked them. Do you know what I mean? Like they were popular, but they didn't really get the job done. The figures weren't great. They'd let loads of things slide, and you're almost the clean-up crew. And you're the person who actually needs to get things. I mean, I've worked with people who've had exactly that. But what they found is there's been no career path, there's been little challenge, the bar is really low, and it can be hard to be the one to move all that up.
Yeah. So you talk about kind of almost being vulnerable and having those caveats and finding those people that you can talk to. But I think the thing that stops us perhaps is that we don't want to show that we're feeling vulnerable, and perhaps in certain circles in the work environment we think that people might use that to their advantage. Any tips on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, be careful because there are some toxic people out there. I would say practice with your friends, with your spouse, how things sound coming out of your mouth. But also, people might want to use it against you. But actually, having the courage of your convictions, you're in the leadership role. You're not a muppet. You got the job. And actually, part of that, because there's no rule book on leadership, what's become a really important idea to think about is leadership of self, personal leadership. So even if you're not yet a leader, if you're on this session today and you're an aspiring leader, thinking about what is me putting my best foot forward at work, and regardless of what other people are doing, what other people are thinking. I know group dynamics and systems can be very intense, and if you're the only one speaking up, it can be really difficult. But taking some small calculated risks. One thing I know as a coach is just every single person around the table has got something going on in their head. Every single person, work can be really stressful. People are incredibly vulnerable and open with coaches, and they're not so much with each other, which is one of the reasons we focus on how people meet, because then people discover, oh, I'm not the only one that feels like that. John from accounts feels like that. Destiny from marketing feels like that. Oh, Amir from bookkeeping. And people start to discover that there's actually humans sitting around the table.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about the people who might be joining this webinar, and what we find is the best marketing communications functions are integrated functions. We use the analogy of the orchestra, and widening participation, talking to admissions, who are talking to student recruitment, who are talking to comms. But what actually happens is you get this mega function, and you have a leader and some associate directors, but they can become hugely siloed. So how can the leaders on this call get their teams to work better together?
Because I think this is relevant for many organizations. The first point is that people do what they want to do. So you can't actually get them to do anything. They really, they really are. It's annoying. I mean, if anyone's parents on this call, try and get your children to do something they don't want to do. So it's, and the first thing is, which is often not popular, but is actually to involve everybody. To say, we'd like to be working more across teams. We'd like to be more cross-functional. What are your ideas how we do that? As a leader, you don't have to have all the answers. You have to be the person who opens up the discussion and makes the thing. So I've been a coach for 25 years. I don't know what's going to come up with a group. I genuinely don't know. In the old days, I used to control it with 9:10. We will share about this. 9:20, we will do this exercise. And actually, that really doesn't work. So what does work is being confident in a leader or chairing the meeting in your capacity to hold whatever comes up in the room, to hold the ideas, even the ones you think are terrible or people you don't like and putting forward the ideas. But some quick wins to start to build relationships are, I've got them written down here to make sure that I got the rest, virtual coffees. I'm a massive fan of this. Or if you meet in person, coffees. It's somebody from admissions taking time to have a coffee with someone in recruitment, half an hour, and many people are virtual these days. What's it like? What are your biggest frustrations? How did you get into the role? If marketing were going to help more, and maybe even a bit about them if you want to, about how they work when they're in the office, that type of thing. And as a leader, put that into your performance review. Relationships across the teams.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Who's on your list this month? Who are you going to go and have a coffee with? Welcoming mistakes is another one. So that, this is really hard for leaders. It's really hard for me. I made a massive mistake in a meeting with a client the other day. It took me about a day to get over the humiliation and to avoid turning it into a learning point to save myself. And then I actually just came clean and went, oh, I've made a mistake and here's what I did and here's how and here's how I'm going to rectify it. And God, it was not comfortable. And I knew it was the right thing. But having an environment where mistakes are okay is one thing. And then the last thing is look at how you run your teams, and then maybe have some cross-functional meetings which are to talk about process, to talk about relationships, rather than all tasks and all agenda.
Yeah. And I think what you said at the start, people won't change unless they want to. People can be really obstructive, can't they? And I always remember a senior leader at a university said he was going to give me a lesson in change management. And the lesson was that you had the idea of what you wanted to change in your head and you consulted widely, but really you were still going to always do the idea that you had in your head. Doesn't work, does it?
Well, it works if you want to be short-term right. Being right is really overrated. I think I remember we were talking about it. I coached somebody who was always right in some respects, but he was dragging the team over the finish line, sort of broken and bloodied in a sack. So where's the succession planning? Where's the employee engagement? Where's the actual sort of long roots and health in the organization? They're kind of not there.
Yeah.
So that's and we all know that there are people who will go the extra mile for at work, and there'll be people who we don't even think about or we don't actually like, and so we'll avoid being in a meeting with them. And all of that can impede the together collaboration of accomplishing the mission.
Yeah. I will say, we'll take a pause to remind everybody, we, as usual on our webinars, we will invite questions for Ginny. So I'll be doing that at 1 o'clock. And the other thing to say is that if you are a director or an associate director or head right now, I'm going to be doing some taster sessions with Ginny in January in Cheltenham in my new office, 18th for directors, 19th of January for associate directors. if you think you might be interested, just ping me an email, penny@pennieccles.co.uk. Just write, I'm interested. That's fine. If it's we don't have lots of spaces, so we might have to do a waiting list if we've got too many people. But I'm really interested in building some closed groups where people can really start to share and learn and build as leaders and associate directors. Okay, so back to it. So I ponder on some of the conversations that we've had, and I remember when I was promoted to an executive role at a university, and it's still quite rare to have a marketer on the executive role, and it was a massive deal for me. And I just remember those first 6 months were quite hard for me. And you had the healthy challenge back to me where you kind of said, Penny, you've got to where you have by being right, and that's great, but this is not the game you're playing now. It's not about being the best or the right person at everything. You're playing this new game. And it was one where internal stakeholder relationships were going to be absolutely key for me to build in the future. So how can leaders build more collaborative relationships across their university, particularly in mind, to get them to build the brand and student recruitment objectives? How do they do that? How do they collaborate properly as leaders across their institutions?
Well, as with some of those other things we're talking about, get that it's a thing, get that it's part of their job. It's really essential.
Yeah.
Because you can't get stuff done in a vacuum on your own in an organization. It's actually means you'll be working really long hours, weekends, and it actually makes life really difficult. This thing I talked about earlier about people you don't naturally get on with, work out a way to do that. They don't have to be your besties, but actually they're going to have a difference of opinion. I sometimes ring up people in my community that, I really don't get on with at all. I don't really like their point of view. But actually, if I run a question past them, I know that I'm going to get exactly what they think because they've got zero interest in being my friend. The internal stakeholder things, you're all working in the same system. You're all trying to get the job done. One of the things that I've done, which I haven't done for ages actually, and I think it's a really good idea, is I used to draw a stick figure, which would be said client, and then we would say, who are all the stakeholders in your life? And then we would, and sometimes depending, we would put home stakeholders in as well, family, spouse, etc. But actually, if you put who are all the stakeholders in your work and you draw yourselves a stick figure and you write them all around, and then you think about where do you put your relationship energy. And actually, it can be really telling because it might be there's a part of the university where you really need to start to build some connections. And it's the more we understand each other, the more ideas we have, the more creativity comes in. And in fact, there's a really cool organizational setup called the Empathy Museum. And they were traveling the country. And what it was is you put on some pair of someone's shoes and you got a recording of their life and you walked a mile in their shoes. So it was a real opportunity to empathize, and it's been phenomenally successful. I think the empathymuseum.org, possibly, not sure. Go and check it out. But that's why stakeholders are really important. And commercially, it can also save your backside from making some quite big mistakes, because then you kind of have a sense of what's going on elsewhere in the organization. So I think it's a really important part of a leader's role.
Yeah. I remember we talked about kind of learning the system in which you operate. And I think when I've talked to people, whoever will listen, and I talk to them about this system, learning the system they kind of say, well, I don't want to play the game. I don't want to be in the system. Nobody's going to force me into a system. I want to be an authentic leader. And I remember you have some views on authenticity, don't you, Ginny?
Oh my God, you would not want me some days being authentic because I'm a complete cow. very, very mean, self-seeking, particularly if I'm actually feeling insecure and really vulnerable, I can come out all kind of sort of feisty and combative and, really pretty unpleasant. This whole thing about authenticity, I'd say it drives me nuts. It doesn't, because I sort of see where it's going, but I think it is overrated as a blanket statement. People say, I think what people are pointing to is, I don't want to be building a relationship just because I'm, for manipulating it to get the job done. That's a really sort of 70s, 80s perspective. These relationships, these collaborations, working well together, are absolutely critical for getting the right job done. It's not really a game. And people talk about, not wanting to play politics. Those are very outdated views. And actually having healthy work commercial relationships on your agenda as part of your leadership role, I think it is really important. It doesn't matter how great you are, you can't do it on your own.
Yeah, I have to be candid. When we had this discussion, I had to really force myself to do this, but I had to remind myself that I was doing it in service to my institution, and it was my job.
How did it work out for you? How did it work out for you?
It worked out brilliantly, and a lot of misunderstandings were cleared up, and I was able to achieve my objectives by having better relationships. And like you say, we weren't going out for drinks on an evening or anything like that, but we just understood each other better, and that was because I invested the time. They were never going to invest the time in me, and it was from the work that we did. I think I did do a stick figure as well at the time. So we've talked about meeting better, and I've run a session with you before, haven't I, with some marketing directors to meet better as a group and to come up with the right issues that will make a difference. So how can this help to break silos and improve relationships, to that meeting better? And you've done it across the globe, haven't you, with not just the HE sector?
Well, the story I have on this, and I'll cut it very short, but I worked with a team and with a leader on how they met, and we worked out a whole bunch of things the team were going to start to do. I mean, I was direct, I was challenging, I was empathetic. I thought I was brilliant. I got back on the plane, I was a bit like, yeah, that's all good. And I coached the leader to coach them, and then the leader rang me up a couple of weeks later and said, oh, hi Ginny. I was like, hi, waiting for the sort of, oh, it's all going so well. Completely opposite. What was happening was the team had said to her, can you find out how much longer we have to do these changes for? And she and I laughed, but what I realized is that the whole day I'd spent with them had actually been a waste of time, and with the leader. And whilst I could have coached her to, I don't know, maybe lead that situation, I realized that what she really needs to do was to talk to other people in her organisation. So I said, have you spoken to Oliver in Munich and Charlotte in London? And she said, no, why would I speak to them? And I said, because they're trying to be great, good leaders too. They've got exactly the same challenges that you have. And that's when we started connecting leaders together to have the sort of conversations they might only ever have with a coach. Because if she opens up and is vulnerable with me about what's going on, then Charlotte's got to do that. Then Oliver's got to do that. And in fact, they could be talking to each other, but what they needed was the skills to make sure that those just weren't sort of bitch, moan and whine sessions, that they were actually really useful. And because they're all inside the system, they get it.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And we invited a few more people in, and it was incredibly successful. And that was about 6 years ago. And that's why we made that the centre of the business, because they've got so much resource for each other and making the time for each other. And then the stuff they learned in that session leaked out virally into the way they work with their teams. So we, did some more stuff with that, but that we weren't expecting that. But does that answer your question about that? That's what we mean about meeting together.
And, we are all in our system, really, the HE marketing system, the HE sector system. But I think it is difficult unless you have that facilitation at the start to really open up. But I think as a group together, we could achieve a lot more for ourselves and for our teams if we just had people that we could share with, I think. And then final question for you. I know some people who are here today are aspiring leaders, so they might not have it in their job description right now. But what advice can you give to them to really make impact as a leader?
Well, I had this wonderful story once about somebody who was a secretary who wanted to be wealthy and wanted to have a good job. And she just started behaving like she was. And she decided wealthy people would listen to classical music. So she started listening to classical music. Anyway, she achieved her dreams, but I've never forgotten it because I thought, stop behaving now how you think you might behave once you're a leader. Aspiring is great. Definitely be ambitious about this. Be open. Ring up marketing directors and say, I'm an aspiring director. Can I take half an hour of your time? Can you give me some advice? When I first became a coach, I rang a coach a day for 30 days. I mean, no one knew what coaching was 25 years ago. People thought I was entering a cult. Anyway, I asked 3 questions. How did you get into this? What are the pitfalls? I knew what the upside was. That was kind of obvious. I wanted to know what the pitfalls were. And what's one piece of advice you'd have for me? So I time bounded it so people knew, I think it was 20 minutes actually, but half an hour. I said, there are 3 questions I want to ask you. I told them the 3 questions. I made it as easy as possible for them to help me. And not a single person said no. And I don't think any marketing director worth their salt would say no unless they start to get hundreds of calls, of course. But embrace your ideas as well. Keep space with them. You'll be noticing stuff all the time. Write them down somewhere so that you can go back to them. And the last one is be building your network. We've talked about the importance of connection and community. Be building those relationships now, because as you move up, those relationships will move up with you, and you need it.
Yeah, I think it's important as well that when you have made it, that you kind of remember to give back as well. So for those CMOs, marketing directors watching this now, you might want to reach out to somebody who you think is an aspiring leader and offer that, because sometimes it's just a difficult ask, isn't it? Okay, so we'll be opening up for questions in a little while. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see that we've got a webinar coming up in January on how to set realistic course targets and restore your sanity. This was the other question I asked you. What would you be interested in? I wanted to call it how to stop setting stupid targets. Because I think that's what's actually happening. The amount of universities every year that say they're going to grow, and the numbers that they come out with, and if we are in that system and we can see those targets and we just think, how on earth is that going to happen, then we're going to be discussing that at the next webinar. So please do join us. I think Gemma will put the link in the chat. Thank you, Gemma, if you can see this. So please do join us for our next webinar. And remember that if you would like to come and see Ginny in person for a taster session of Drum, and just to connect with other marketing leaders, drop me an email here and just type, yes, I'm interested, and I will get back to you. I've already seen I've had some emails. Thank you very much. So yeah, we'll get back to you and we'll organise the dates. So I think we've got some questions already. Let's have a look. Okay, so somebody said, what about previous leaders who were too much in control, arrive and find that teams have no confidence in doing their jobs? How would you help a leader? I'm guessing somebody who's landed in that environment and has a really underconfident team.
Yeah. Well, I love that you've noticed that. Some people just come in and just don't really think about it, and they come in with all their ideas and they're not reading the room. So I love that you've noticed that. There are obviously, there's a number of ideas. All the things I talk about, they're ideas. So if they fit with how you want to lead, then go for it. And if they don't, chuck them and think of something else. But with this, I would really spend some time talking to the team, and not just about what they don't like and what's been going on and building up a picture of that, but actually, if you were in charge now, what might you do if you were me? is a question I might ask. I might also say, what do you think needs to happen in this department next? Given there's a change of leadership, we've got some opportunities here, and really listen, really listen to them. And I would, when we're working with to help people meet better, one of the things that we're really important to do is to help people grow their confidence. So we don't say, oh, that's a really terrible idea. We go, that is a really great idea. Can you save that till we get to this point? Because I think it's going to be critical here. And what we're doing now is X. So it's building that confidence each time for good enough rather than perfect. You can be overt about it as well. You can say, let's have a look and see what we might do differently. But one of the things you need to know is that it's going to take some time for people to build the confidence that you really mean it. It's not so that's important to understand.
Yeah, I've got a great one here. So, and I know you gave me some advice on this. So what advice can you give on how to set up your stall when you're about to lead a new team for the first time? So if I may, I'd got my director role, and then I went immediately on maternity leave, and I had a chat with Ginny just before I got back, because I was feeling a bit nervous anyway, but there I was going to join this new team. And I remember you saying to me, Ginny, so what's going to be your opening gambit? When you get everybody together, how are you going to set the scene, set the vision? And I just remember, naive Penny at the time, saying, oh, should I do that? So is there any advice you can give to this person about how to set up their stall?
Yeah, I mean, well, not entirely quick answer, but again, I love that you're thinking about it. Really think about it. As Penny said, she hadn't really thought about it. So one of the things that we can do, I mean, it's a little bit like some of the things that get in the way of public speaking, is we can kind of think of ourselves and all the things we've got to think about and what people are going to think of us when we get into the new team. It's actually, I wonder where they're at. I wonder what they're thinking about. I wonder what they need from me in this moment. I would tend to open quite strongly. I'd have something prepared if these were your first words to the team, with a plan, but I'd have something prepared about what I was interested to do. I would really avoid that. I'm so excited to be here and it's such an honor to get the role and blah, 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 blah. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I would open with something like, here's what I'm curious to explore with you, or here's something visionary. Here's what I think is possible with this department or with you all, and this is what I want to explore. And I would also add something about, over the coming days and weeks, I'm going to be meeting with you all because I'd love to hear your ideas, and I'd make it very invitational. And I probably would speak to a few close colleagues beforehand, try out my ideas, try out some different ways of saying things. It would be important. It establishes status and gravitas, how you show up in those first moments with the team.
Yeah, I remember with mine, whilst I'd been on maternity leave, a couple of people had been appointed in my absence, and somebody, after I did my opening statement, which I'd really prepared, I really did, somebody came up to me and said that they'd found it quite difficult being in post, and that they were about to leave, but actually because they'd heard the new vision for the team, they were going to stick with it, and they were actually such a high performer, such a great member of the team. So I was really glad that I'd done that. And you're right, the fact that this person has thought about what that might look like is the best start, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I can't do it here, obviously, but I've got a really neat, easy to remember process for doing. So when you talk about open, it's called the open process. So about grabbing attention, about having people feel like, oh gosh, thank God Penny's here because she's really got this. Which we'll be sharing in the programs.
I remember that, and I use it all of the time. So come to the session in Cheltenham. I'm sure.
We could think about doing it.
Okay, next question. So how do you lead a team and encourage collaboration when so many urgent directives come from the top down? And I speak from experience, they're not always urgent, but there is a loud voice always from, the very senior team.
So can you ask me the question again?
Sorry. How do you lead a team and encourage collaboration when there's those urgent directives from the top?
So what I'm not entirely sure, but I think what that question might be pointing to is that you're trying to get people to collaborate, but the sheer weight of work is not giving you a lot of space.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much coming at you. Yeah, well, it's difficult because we're into conversations about managing up now, about being able to, almost stem the flow. Your disorganization does not constitute an emergency on my part is something that I always want to say to people, but I appreciate it's really difficult with the person who's responsible for your P45.
Yeah.
So starting to move the collaboration topic onto the agenda with your teams, looking for some of the virtual coffees, the smaller, quicker ways to do that, but be overt about it with the team. And again, talk to the team about it. We've got the sheer weight of work. This is really important. How can we start to weave this in? So consultation with the team, but also starting to think about managing up and how you educate the person who's pushing down on you about what is and is not an appropriate amount of workload. I know it's difficult, but it is also something essential to get on top of.
Yeah, but those managing up skills that we talked about in our sessions transformed things for me. I was heading down a slippery slope, and it's something you have to tackle despite it feeling deeply uncomfortable.
I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you remember something that you did that you felt uncomfortable about and you went ahead and did it and it worked?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think at the time my line manager was perhaps inadvertently, I'll be kind, inadvertently describing me in a certain way. But that wasn't how I wanted to be positioned in my institution. And after speaking to you about this, you just kind of said, you've got to put this person straight, otherwise it's going to keep happening. And I'm pleased to say I did. I didn't have a script in front of me, but I rehearsed what might happen, how the response might be, and it instantly changed how this person behaved in rooms with me, and therefore how other people behaved around me, because that person was so influential. Yeah, managing up is the key.
Well, that's back to your question about confidence in your own instincts. And when I said you've got to risk, there's a leap of faith. I remember, now you've reminded me, I remember how much you did not want to have that conversation. But
really?
it was, but you couldn't let it carry on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So how do you balance being the type of leader that you aspire to be, whilst not overthinking every detail and being swept up by people pleasing? Oh, the people pleasing. How do you avoid that?
Well, naming it is really important. Imagining what some of your people pleasing, what your most overt people pleasing behaviors are. So, for instance, maybe you're someone who just goes, yeah, I can take that on. Yeah, I can do that. The person who always can, doesn't mean you should, is actually stopping yourself. Identifying maybe your top 2 or 3 people pleasing behaviors, where they get triggered, because it is a trigger, where they get triggered, and then planning on how you might behave differently. That might sound a bit clunky, but imagine learning to drive. Everything was clunky and then it all got very easy. So one of the things we sometimes avoid is moving into that learning phase because it can feel uncomfortable. But if you already know that you do that and you want to start looking for alternatives. So when the thing happens, you've got a different choice. If you don't pre-think it, it's really hard to change it in the moment. You just get instantly triggered.
Yeah. This is a big one. I don't know if you can answer this in a couple of minutes.
None of these questions are small. I'm trying to be useful, but they're not.
You are. I'm sure everybody's finding it really useful. So how do you open colleagues' mindsets when they're set in their ways and resistant to change?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining, or as I know in the HE sector, there's a lot of traditional thinking. It can be really hierarchical, and it's not how we've done things before, around here for the last 300 years. I know that can be really difficult. You can make an overt request for an open thinking session. So you can say, I know that we've always done it like this. I'd like to ask you for X amount of your time to look at an alternative. We can still go back to doing it this way, but I just want to explore what might work like this. So that's one way. Another way is to make it a slam dunk. If you start linking it to things they care about, they care about profits, link it to profits, even if you're not focused on that. If they care about overseas student admissions, link it to that. Find a way that the ROI is something that they care about. And the other one is to build some allies. Go and see people in the organisation who might have an insight to the people whose minds are difficult to change, and just ask for their advice or how you might approach it. Sometimes you've got to be clever about these things.
Yeah, and I think going back to the stakeholder management, sometimes you just got to work doubly hard with those people, and you don't want to, but if you can crack those people who are really resistant to change, that's going to make the biggest difference to your working life.
Well, I just want to say one of the generally people aren't bad people, and one of the reasons people are resistant to change is because it's really uncomfortable for them. So having some empathy about that or some compassion about that can also help your cause.
Yeah. I've been working with a client recently, and let's just say the finance director of the client is obviously very close to the money and doesn't want to release anything unless there's a cast iron case. And of course, with marketing, there isn't always a cast iron case. And I'm not saying just go with it's I can feel it in my gut. You would never say that, but have your metrics together. But this client was really struggling, so I took the finance director for a coffee and just listened to what they had to say and what their concerns were about the dark arts of marketing, and whether did it even work, what was the point, and just those few conversations I think helped to just that mutual understanding, I think, really helped. So yeah, investing in those who are resistant to change can make a big difference.
Well, there's a clinical paradigm that says no matter how weird somebody else's behaviour looks, it makes perfect sense to them. So going to find out what things look like in their world is really important.
Yeah. And then maybe last question then. Two questions, because the last one's good as well. So how do you lead teams when there is little stability? There's constant restructures. There's a theme. This is a theme in the HE sector that come from the highest levels that impact service delivery, confidence, and morale. So how do you lift a team that's undergone?
God, questions are getting bigger and bigger.
I know.
I'm going to give a quick flip answer to this, and call it what it is. Acknowledge that it's hard for you all, particularly if people are being let go. The ones that are behind it can feel really unstable. They can be thinking, God, when's my number up? So actually just saying, God, how is it for everybody? Sometimes we've opened sessions where people have just talked about how they're impacted by what's going on. And then we've said, what do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on, I don't know, moving forward with said thing, or do you want to talk about someone? Usually people really want to get stuck into the work. But I think pretending it's not going on and pushing ahead with your agenda anyway can be unwise.
Yeah. Okay. And finally,
yes,
can you give advice of somebody going into a new leadership role and feeling self-critical or imposter syndrome?
Yes. You are so not alone. Build your gang. Get your gang you can talk with. The people we hang out with, we see ourselves reflected back at them. So don't soldier on your own, just trying to work harder, be better, and really stress yourself out. Get a gang of people around you. It doesn't have to be tons, but people you can ring up and go, oh my God, I'm about to present blah blah, and I'm feeling really not worthy, and talk to other people about it. You are not alone. This is something we coach on all the time. It's something that I totally experience as when I'm doing new things as well. So it is something that you can get support on, and you can get to a new place with it. But getting a gang together, I would say, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think you've already said it in answer to some of the other questions. Just actually naming it and identifying it can be one of the biggest things you can do, because once you understand what you're feeling, you can be a bit more rational about it, I think, and say, this is normal. I've heard of imposter syndrome. Other people experience this, and recognize the things that you are good at and the things that you can really play on. You've got to where you have because of some strengths that somebody has identified, and they need you to use those strengths more. So tap into those strengths and be that unique leader that only you can be. You're not an imposter, you can do it. Yep. Okay, thank you so much, Ginny. I think those questions were big questions.
Well, I know that marketing departments, they're often carrying the weight of the university on them. I mean, I know it's a big deal, and they're brilliant questions.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Again, send me an email saying, yes, I'm interested if you'd like to come and see us in Cheltenham. 18th for directors, 19th for associate directors and heads. And we'll just, have a chat and see how this feels as a closed group. So thank you once again, Ginny, and thank you everybody for joining us. Bye.
Bye.